started. So if everyone wants to get into your seats, we're going to get started now. I'm Rana Foroohar. I'm the global business columnist and associate editor at the Financial Times, and I'm so glad everyone's already so chatty, including our panelists. This is going to be an awesome conversation. This session that we're in right now is a jobs creation strategy for the fourth industrial revolution. And just to give you a little bit of context, this session is associated with the Center within the WEF for the New Economy and Society, which is a great project. If you don't know about it, check it out on the homepage. I've been part of this. I know a number of folks in the audience and panel have. And we're here to talk about what, frankly, I think is the most pressing issue of our time, which is how to create jobs and inclusion and a workforce that is ready to grapple with the fourth industrial revolution. How are we going to do that? What's the role of business? What's the role of the public sector? What's the role of civic society in that? So I'm just going to give a few facts to kind of set the stage, and then I'm going to introduce our panelists, and we're going to have a chat amongst ourselves, and then we're going to draw you all in very quickly. And we have some technology in which, if you want to use Slido, I think that some of you probably already have this on your phones, you can email or text in your questions. They're going to appear right here on the screens here, so we can ask them in real time, and then we'll also be able to take questions from the audience as you like. I may also ask you some polls during the conversation. Maybe we can just say that the starting point is the fourth industrial revolution is very anxiety-provoking for a lot of people. It can be scary, but if you look historically, technology has always been a net new jobs creator. However, there are periods of disruption, right? Historically, I mean, we could name all of them hundreds of years back. There are always periods of disruption. Right now, we're going through changes that are broader and deeper and faster than ever before in history. And so that's why it's so important to address these challenges. According to the Forum's Future of Jobs report, which you can find on the website, machines, algorithms in the workplace, all the new technologies we've been talking about all week, could potentially lead to a net positive growth of 58 million jobs, but only if the right labor policies and the right community between all three of these sectors is in place. I'm going to give you one more statistic, which I find very, very interesting. Again, from the WEF report, 65% of children that are entering primary school are going to work in jobs that don't even exist. So that's incredibly exciting. It's also incredibly challenging. I have a daughter who's about to go to college, and I'm trying desperately to figure out, what the future is. So this is very personally relevant to me. So let me just start quickly and introduce our panelists. Starting here from the far right, we have Sharan Burrow, who's the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, and you're based in Belgium.
Good morning.
To her left, we have Hans Vestberg, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Verizon Communications in the USA. To my left, we have Muriel Pénicaud, who is the Labor Minister of France. And on the far left here, we have Alain Dehaze, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Adecco Group of Switzerland, which is a workforce solutions. Okay, I want to make sure I get the description right there. So let me start actually, Sharan, with you, because you're on the front lines of this. I mean, you are representing one of the largest labor organizations in the world. How would you frame these challenges for the workers of the planet?
Well, first of all, let me say that we're not particularly frightened about the technology. We actually think there are ethical issues, but there's societal issues about how you deploy technology, and we don't believe in a deterministic future either. So it is a matter of the use of the technology and then how you integrate it. But for trade unions, we've been integrating technology for decades. You're right that what's different now is the speed and the dramatic shifts in the way production is managed or the way we're dealing with, services of any kind. We do take a little bit of issue of the 68% of jobs. I mean, I've heard these statistics for 3 decades. Yes, the skills will be very different. So if that's the way you categorise it, fine. But you're still going to have agriculture and construction and manufacturing and services in a whole variety of ways. There'll be some new industries. It's really the question of the skills. So if you walk back from this a little and you say, so our challenge is really the transition, and in fact, Rana, you put your finger on it. There are periods of disruption. Now, we've not dealt with those as efficiently as we might have. in previous transitions. But it's always, in economies that have dealt well with this, in businesses that have dealt with it, skilling, upskilling, reskilling, always been part of the equation. And we need to add a few more things now because there will be displaced workers. I mean, the jobs, we can argue about whether there'll be more jobs or less jobs. We're not prepared to give up on full employment, so we hope those statistics are right and more. But it will be, in fact, the case that while there'll be melded or blended jobs with technology, there'll also be displacement. And we have to get the social contract right.
Yeah.
The ILO's report released yesterday actually, you know, I mean, already we've got inequality that's historic levels. So we need to have a renewed social contract for that basis. But yesterday, the ILO's report actually gives you a very good frame on this. Reinvigorated social contract with a floor of a labour guarantee. So as we're seeing displaced workers by platform work, where you are terribly precarious, you can't actually plan your working life or your income, then we can fix that. And so there are solutions. We've just got to have the mindset and the collaborative will to make it happen.
That's a great framing, and I'm thinking about kind of 3 points as you're speaking. One, the challenges differ with automation country to country, big time. There are questions about the meaning of work, and even if jobs aren't completely displaced, everyone's work is going to change. So in a way, this
Yes.
relates to all of us. This isn't just about vulnerable people in certain populations. Hans, let me come to you because you're on the front lines of this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like every CEO I talk to, skill issues, the skills gap, figuring out the arbitrage between jobs that are available, skills that are available is a big deal. Talk to us about that and give us some color about how this is playing out within your own firm.
Yeah, I think that first of all, I mean, my history has been that I've been on the borderline between the technology evolution and how that is impacting positively on our society for many years. So of course, first of all, one needs to understand that this fourth industrial revolution and technology is coming should be the technologies that actually can make this planet sustainable. Because many of the previous industrial revolutions have actually used a lot of our natural resources. And if we want to have equality, everybody have the same possibilities, we need technologies that are coming out on the global platforms and things like that. So there's no way we cannot sort of try to stop it or something. But of course, it posed a couple of challenges, especially for large corporations. I think that, and that's not only for the company that I represent. I mean, we have 155,000 employees. I think for any large corporation, you need new type of skills. And then, of course, we cannot rely on the school system because that's going to take too long. So, of course, we need a new social contract because we probably every 3 to 5 years need new type of skills in the company. And you cannot fire and hire in and out in that size of company. It is so much disruption. So we need, together with the public sector, of course, seeing that we have a long time learning from the public sector. But as a company, I mean, the drive for education and self-learning in a company is enormous. I mean, I can compare the last 20 years I've been in corporations. I mean, right now you have so many training you can take internally, but it's also up to the individual in the company. If I want to reskill, if I want to train, these are the classes you can take if you want that job. So, of course, as a corporation, you work a lot with that. The second thing, which is also a challenge with all this, because when you do global digital platform, you have a total new job environment. Half-time workers, people that can actually sit in one country, innovate a product, and they 3D print in another country. They are self-employed. Large corporations historically stand for all the benefits and having sort of social contribution and all of that. And suddenly we have that labor market, millennials that want to come in, and then you think about large corporation. And I think 10, 15 years out, will it be huge companies with hundreds of thousands of employees? The millennials, they seem to want to come in and out, work 2 years here and part-time and do what they want to do. And the whole system has been built up around large corporations. I think a lot about that. Ultimately, I think if you're purpose-driven and people really like to be there, they think they're going to be there 2 years, they're going to be there 100 years or 25 years. So I think it's possibilities, but those are the things with skills and the new workforce that we're getting in here are big challenges for any large corporation.
That's so fascinating. And, you know, the point that you're making about 3D printing, large businesses, small businesses, global, local, I mean, I've heard that this talked about in the context of the trade debate. You know, maybe trade flows are going to be completely different based on new technologies, but labor markets are going to be
labor
completely
market,
different.
I mean, you're going to sit in one country and you produce in another country. I mean, borders, we have thought about borders being the way you deal with things. Labor market, products, and of course taxes we're discussing constantly right now between countries. But there's so many other things that this digital economy will give you. And it has to be there. If not, we're going to have a urbanization to few places on Earth. We cannot have that if we're going to have a resourceful planet and taking care of it.
Yeah, wow. Okay, there's so much there. We're going to come back to a couple of those points, but no, it's brilliant. But you're raising an important question, which is, what is the new social compact? So, Minister, I'm going to turn to you and ask you how you see that question and what you see the role of the state being in working to buffer all these changes for citizens.
First, we share with you all the fact that the size and the speed of change is unknown. So we face together an unknown. So we have to organize in a different way to face the unknown. We estimate that 10 to 15% of the job will be suppressed in the coming 10 years. 10 to 25 will be created. But maybe the most dramatic change is half a job will dramatically change in the coming years, in the coming 10 years. So the question of reskilling and upskilling become not only a humanist question or something nice, something good, but something vital. Vital for individual, vital for company. I think for company today, the access to capital is much more easier than access to skills.
True.
Of course, there was the war of talents since years and years, but it was only the top. Now it's at all level, at a level, and the company or the nation that will tomorrow will grow and will continue to be able to share will be the one who have invested the best way in skills. It's why we decided to launch a program that I will call Upskill the Nation in France. And in last September, we passed a law that created new rights and new landscape for the whole scaling and upskilling and the lifelong learning, with two main things. First is to create a system that helps companies to keep their employees, but to reskill massively. And second, it's probably the most innovative, is to create a right for any of the 26 workers or employees in France. They will benefit of a credit for training every year, 500 euros every year on an account, and it will be freely on top of what do companies to prepare the future, to anticipate. They will have the freedom to choose their own training, and in next November there will be an app, and everyone will be able to know his right, but also to choose among the whole offer of all certified training, so it's thousands and thousands and thousands of training in France, and to apply and decide by itself. And why it's important? Because, and we see it in France, as you know, these weeks, many of our citizens in all our countries think that they are victims of globalization and technology. It's a threat for them. But when you are not in the driving seat, change is always a threat. The only way you can be you need to be proactive. You need to be in the driving seat to have part of choice, to have be able to choose your future. It's never 100%. You need to be empowered, enabled to choose part of your professional life better than yesterday. And that's why there's a sense of this law is this individual training app and right with money, and where everyone will be able to make its own choice. At the same time, we have decided to invest 15 billion euros in 5 years to train massively 1 million young people and 1 million unemployed people, because still, even if it decreased in 1 year, we have still a very high level of unemployment in France, to massively train to current job where we don't have the competencies. 1 out of 2 companies has difficulty to recruit. At the same time, we have a high level of unemployment, but also, of course, every new jobs or transform job lead to digital revolution or climate change revolution. which
Yeah.
create a lot of opportunities too. And so we do both at the same time, massive investment. Of course, this is based, the new right is based on a discussion with unions and employers, and based on an agreement that they have taken together, so we have pushed that a little further. That's the responsibility of the parliament and the government. It's really something where, of course, we need on board all the industry, all the companies,
Yeah.
and unions, of course.
So this is fascinating. I'm hearing three really important things. First of all, you've got that ecosystem going, public, private, union, all that is important. You're echoing something that I've heard a lot of people say to me this week, which is that it's very different depending on whether you're the one articulating change or receiving change. Very different dynamics, and it's important that people feel empowered. And then thirdly, and I think this is really important, this is something I hear all the time in the US, this idea of giving a tax credit for investment in human capital rather than just capital. Because as you say, there's a glut of money, but there's a shortage of human capital. So how to kind of help businesses to incentivize that investment. So those are great points. Alain, let me come to you. You are, as someone that runs a company that specializes in workforce solutions, all kinds of temporary labor, all kinds of sort of interim needs, you're kind of in the middle of this. You must be seeing a lot of the pressure points between these three different areas. So I'm wondering if you can kind of articulate what you see as some of the pressing challenges, and also if there are interesting solutions you're seeing that you would call out that are scalable in any particular countries.
Yes. First of all, I share the optimism of Sharan, because technology is opening a lot of new opportunities. And as you like figures, I will also quote some figures. 40% of the American population was in 1901 feeding the total American population.
Yeah.
Today it is 2%. And
yeah, we can do this.
unemployment has never been so low in the US. So it means that a lot...
Doesn't mean a good job, but...
Yeah, and that we'll come back to that.
We'll come to that. But it means that, thanks to creativity, new industries, new jobs will be created. The big challenge for me, from what we see at all 100,000 customers we have in 60 countries, is the speed of the transition, because technology is making its inroad extremely fast. And the challenge is, how does society, companies and employees adapt to this acceleration of technology inroad? So the key challenge is about the speed and the way we transition from one system to the new, let's say, to the future of work. And there, I would say that's perhaps my second message. It's time to act, because it's my 8th year here at Davos, and for sure the last 3 years, everybody has spoken about the future of work, the need to reskill, upskill, and so on. And we are saying, as the ADECO group, it is time to act.
Yeah.
And what does it mean, time to act? It means that, yes, we need to reinvigorate the social contract, but this social contract must be a tripartite solution. It must be a multi-stakeholder solution. You have heard Minister Pénicaud about the great initiative the French government has taken regarding reskilling. This is very good, because we see also that it is the responsibility of government in the world to put in place the right framework to allow this transition to upskill, reskill people. Second, you have the employers, and especially entrepreneurs. If you want your company, your product to be sustainable towards the future, you need to innovate, you need to adapt. But especially, you need the right talents.
Yeah.
And if you don't develop the right talents for the future, your company won't be sustainable.
Yeah.
So this is also, I would say, a call to the employers. Do you have a predictive workforce plan? Do you have a predictive plan regarding the talent you will need in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, in order to remain competitive and sustainable? And third, it is also time to act for individual staff. Everybody, as an individual, has also the responsibility to remain employable.
Yeah.
And we see that we made some statistic. 57% of employees finds that they are also individually responsible to become employable for the future. So this is a call we are doing. It is time to act. It must be a multi-stakeholders responsibility. And then we come with some innovation. We had also a new paper, and we said, yes, as upskilling, reskilling is about investment in human capital. First of all, we said we should consider reskilling and upskilling as an investment and treat it differently.
Yeah.
And instead, as taking reskilling and upskilling as a cost, let's take it as a capital amortization and amortize your cost of reskilling according to the life of your skills. And we know that every individual today is losing 30% of his competencies and skills after a period of 4 years. So it is important to reskill yourself.
Sorry, go ahead, make your last point, and then I want to jump.
No, and what we said, I'm glad with the initiative of the French government. It should be individualized, this reskilling solutions, because according to the new sociological framework, the gig economy, the freelance and so on, we see that especially the young generation is going from one company to the others, from one project to the others. So it is important that, yes, they have the flexibility they are looking for, but at the same time, there is a security put in place. So that's why we are suggesting to individualize that kind of initiative.
That's a really fascinating point. You're making me think about two things. Again, the idea that labor should be an asset and not just a cost on the balance sheet, both at a national level and at a corporate level, very important. Also, this idea of how does the millennial generation want to work? What are the different ways in which what are jobs going to look like? I'm thinking, I want to just share one quick anecdote, and then Sharan, I want to ask you a question. I had a fascinating conversation with a head of a German pharmaceutical company. And she said that they have 2 tracks now in terms of employment that they offer. When people come into the company, they offer a traditional track. You get benefits. You have kind of a slow and steady path, more security. But then they offer an entrepreneurial track where you come in, you don't maybe get the same amount of benefits, but you have a piece of whatever innovation. It's more of a kind of a venture capital model. Said 70% of the millennials are choosing that model, which I found was quite fascinating. But this also begs the question, which Sharan, you touched on, what is a good job? And to your point, there's plenty of job creation in some places. In the US, a lot of politicians would boast about job creation. Half of the fastest growing job categories are $15 an hour or less. So what does a good job look like? How do we make sure we have them?
Well, you make sure you have them, first of all, by ensuring everybody has a living wage, a minimum living wage. If you can't live on a wage, then in fact you have a precarious life. That leads to a precarious economy.
That needs to be supported by the state, potentially.
Well, that's true, but often not at all. Look at the 800,000 workers in America. I think this is amazing that they're middle-income earners, but what you see is the precariousness when within 30 days they're losing their homes, can't pay their mortgages, having cars repossessed. These are not poor workers. But I wanted to say 2 things about the good job question. We can make any job a good job. And we can recognise work, where it care work, for example, and pay it a good wage. It's not about affordability. The world's 3 times richer than it was 20 years ago, but we're not distributing it through wages. So a minimum living wage, universal social protection, so you have income when in fact you have times when you've been displaced or when you're raising a family or whatever it might be. And that can be for self-employed workers. We organise self-employed entrepreneurs. We organise informal women in cooperatives. We organise farm workers who have no attachment to any corporation but rely on corporations for supply chains, as well as the big companies. And we know the solutions. You can put a labour guarantee under all workers. It's a much more significant challenge for us to say, do we have the political will to do that? I think, Alain, you're right. We always like to be challenged as individuals. But if you're in a displaced environment, or great to hear your commitment to upskilling and retraining your own workforce, because we've got away from doing that, and that's a loss of capital for companies. But actually, I don't buy the millennial, we want to be here and there and everywhere. Talk to them. Yes, they want some excitement in the first years of their life, but most of my staff are now in that category. they're suddenly starting to get married and they want to have children. So they want childcare and they want secure jobs. And they're not too different from the rest of us.
Kids grow up.
The only thing is they have a more flexible approach to technology because they grew up with it. That's a good thing. So I think the mix is there. And I'm really pleased to hear Minister Pénicaud say that it's a credit to train on a certified course, because I've seen a lot of skills portfolios funded, not enough, but a lot of them. But we've seen then terrible fly-by-night companies who are not providing the skills that are valuable to individuals or to business because they don't have certification, you can't have a trajectory of a qualifications base and so on. So we have to get the back end of the systems right.
That's interesting.
But at its you know, at the most challenging is to say, are we prepared to give everybody a good, secure working life, whatever they're working at?
Yeah.
And we can do it.
Yeah.
We have the money, universal social protection, a minimum living wage, and the right to bargain collectively. In fact, today we're talking about two really exciting pieces of work with the manufacturing team here, because there's a big shift going on in industry with technology as well and with sustainability challenges. And this sector, manufacturing sector, actually industry employs a quarter of the world's workforce and has a third of the global emissions. So as a passionate 1.5 supporter, then because there are no jobs on a dead planet, then we actually need to figure this out. So in Sweden, for example, it is a joint commitment. The unions bargained for 3% of the income to go into a fund. The employers have contributed, and now they've realised that only pays for about 4 to 6 months of income and training. So they're taking now, with government support, actually the unemployment component of what it would be like to be out of work for a year, putting that in the fund, and they can now fund income and training for up to a year. They've done the same thing, slightly different between employers and workers in Denmark, and we can do it anywhere if we are actually creative about this and everybody's on the job together. But people do want security.
I love the real world example of this working because it's really important. I mean, so often we talk about 35,000 feet things, and to be able to say, look, this country has done it and it's replicable, that's really hugely important. You mentioned, a couple people have mentioned climate. You know, in the U.S., the idea of a Green New Deal is becoming a political issue. I know in many countries that's been the same for a while. I'm curious how you all, maybe Hans, you have thoughts on this, how you see that integration, the win-win potentially?
No, I think that this is, first of all, the role, I've been sort of CEO for a long time, different companies. The change of the role that you have and the responsibility you have, I think is, maybe I wasn't mature enough before, but I think that that you manage your shareholders, you manage your employees is important, and the customers, but the social responsibility if you lead a large corporation has just dramatically changed. I mean, if you think about the climate thing, and I think that every company needs to think like this, first of all, you need to go to yourself. What is you as a company doing? I mean, I can look at our company, okay, we try to travel less, we do everything we can to reduce our CO2 footprint. Then the next step is where we have 10x more impact is where the equipment, we have equipment all over the world. We just procure things that has less power consumption all the time. That's 10x. Then I have 10x on top of that. And that's where I really have an impact. That's when I have solutions that are IoT solutions, where my customers can actually have a much less CO2 emission.
And does this create jobs?
Absolutely. Ultimately, it creates both jobs and also a purpose and a mission for a company contributing to, I see we both have the 17 goals, and I think that if you come into a company today, even if you're a millennium, you want to work for a company that's actually trying to do good in there. And you always need to go back to your strategy. Our strategy, we want to be best on technology worldwide. We use that in our case. Any company can be part of it. And I think that creates job, it creates motivation and purpose for the people in the company. And I just want to go back to that. Yes, we get all these surveys about millennials and all of that. I'm not equally binary as you. I say the jury's still out how they would like to have their work life in the future. And I think also they're going to get families, they're going to think differently as well over time. But we need to cater for both of it. But clearly, we see right now initially they want to work differently. But on this climate, I think you both can create a lot of solutions which are creating jobs. But start with yourself before you tell everybody else we need to do this and that. You need to go into your own company and show your own employees you are taking care of whatever you can do internally, and then you can move outwards.
You're making a very important point about how this solving this problem, not just the climate problem, but the jobs problem, and potentially the two of them together, it's integral both to customers who want to see this, but also to the labor pool, because as you say, millennials don't want to work for companies that don't have purpose. Minister, I want to come to you on the idea of climate and innovation and job creation. This is obviously an international challenge. This is not an easy moment to have multilateral agreements politically. Chrystia Freeland, the Trade Minister of Canada, was on stage the other day and made a very, very interesting point about how yes, we are a global community. You have the big problems are global problems, but you need policies that work within your countries too, because you can't actually craft smart foreign policy unless you have strong, domestic support. France is in a very interesting moment with this at the moment. How is the tension between global and local playing out in your country in terms of labor markets and job creation?
First, I would say that. And it's in echo of Sharan, what she said. We are in a very important moment. I think the future is not written, but the long term is urgent, very urgent. Otherwise, it will not be long term. On both sides, the climate change, with all the opportunities and challenges it represents, but also on the social part. I'm convinced that globalization without more social regulation will go to the end. It's the same for climate change. So it's not time to make a lot of nuance. It's a time for big action. And for instance, in the excellent ILO report, we will support the idea of a universal social protection minimum. When I was an AVP in HR, I did the first global agreement on this in our company. It was Danone. Now there are 300 companies that, through global deal initiatives that were launched by the Prime Minister of Sweden, are on a voluntary basis doing global agreement on social. So it can be training, it can be social protections. But if we don't have this content in Europe, first, I will go back to your question and to Europe, and at the global level, people react negatively to globalization, to technology, they fear, and they will say stop. And they stop from and the rise of nationalism in many countries is linked to this threat. And if we don't have more social content in Europe and in the world, the time will be very difficult. It's the same questions of climate change. That after how you combine, it's not easy. We're exactly facing that in France at the moment. We are determined on the social part and determined on the ecological part. But change for climate change enough quickly means what? Means change a lot of practices and jobs in agriculture, construction, industry, transport, waste management. A lot of opportunity, a lot of new jobs. And how you make it possible for people to join, to catch up enough quickly for this to represent an opportunity. The social movement we had in the street the last 2 months started by this question. Because we wanted to go quickly to change our practices on CO2 emission through cars. And people say, but we don't need to go to work and to live. How you joined this long term and the short term. And that's the key for me of the agreement we need. For that, we need a stronger and better Europe, because France alone will not be able to do it. We do our part. And I think we need to ally more at the global level to what we said for years and years, but for years and years it was just nice words. How you combine the economic growth, the climate change, and the social progress. And if we don't combine the three, the world will be chaotic. If we combine, and it's a responsibility for all of us, we can make a change. And I think it's not written. The good news, it's not written.
But the good news is we know the statistics. For every dollar you invest in climate solutions, you are going to create jobs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, there are going to be jobs that are disrupted as well. And we can, again, within the social contract, above that labour guarantee, we can actually put the just transitions principles that are worked out. With the B team, we're trialling the ILO's just transition principles, translated into business speak, about how you engage your workforce in the change from the beginning. Because the trade union movement is convinced, whether it's climate or technology, and sometimes it'll be both, most often now it'll be both, then if you engage your workforce, if you have secure pensions for those who are going to retire, perhaps earlier than they might want, if you have the skills support we're talking about, redeployment support and income through the transition, it works. It actually works. People then feel secure enough to say, okay, well, what is the change we're going to have to make?
Yeah.
Because the fear is what we have to get over. And the age of anger that we're seeing, not just in France, Minister, I was on the streets of India 2.5 weeks ago, 200 million people on strike, including farmers and everybody, and the anger is palpable. I've never felt it before.
Alain, jump in.
So we can solve this, but you have to get high ambition through engagement and just transition, and we have to give people good jobs and an income on which they can live.
Again, like in the previous discussion, I think it's again time to act. And in this perspective, there is a famous word: you get what you measure. and also in this commission and this report from the Global Commission, there is a recommendation, which is to deploy the so-called integrated reporting. You know, companies today are mainly reporting their financials. But if we really want to move forward, is really to not only to encourage, but to strongly encourage companies to put in place the integrated reporting, which force companies to report for sure on the financials, like it was in the past, but also on the social key factors, key metrics, and the environmental key metrics. And this will force companies to really move, think about it, but it will also make the financial community, and especially the investment community to look at these metrics and invest in companies which are really working for a great future.
Well, and it feels like we're at a tipping point because obviously, last year, big news with BlackRock saying we need to look at more than just share price. But a lot, I mean, this is great point. What is the metric? We need a new metric. Our CEOs are telling me, okay, we love that it's not just about share price. That's good. But what is the metric? Yeah.
And no, I think this is absolutely right. And I think that I've been in companies that have a sustainability report since 25 years back. So I think that we have been reporting all this time, and you start to get the investors start asking you, are doing this? I think the problem is that you have a financial metrics where Standard and Poor and everybody, this is exactly how we rate you, and this is a triple B. In the social environment, there's so many environment and so many things that, and I think as a corporation, we would be happy if it would be one set of benchmark that is important for the society and do it. And the Global Alliance, the Global Benchmark Alliances, which is a foundation in Netherlands, is actually starting to try to do that. I'm also on the board of UN Foundation, which is of course supporting that. And I think that ultimately we all are trying to do that sustainable reporting, but if we can also even get some benchmark how it hangs together between us, it's even better. And I think that CEOs like me and many others, we would even welcome that. But right now, you meet investors here and they ask you about one thing and another, they are measuring this. And of course, it becomes 3,000 KPIs ultimately. And then you need to decide, these are the KPIs that really matter to me. Hopefully, that matters for the society as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If I may add, Hans and I, we are CEO of listed companies. So we meet every year 120, 150 investors in individual meetings.
Yeah.
How many times did we get the questions about our social and environmental metrics?
I would say I get it, but how many times did I bring it up myself? Many.
That's very good answer.
Because
That's a good inspiration
it's
for
not
all of
only
us.
their responsibility, it's partly my responsibility as a leader to bring it up, what we're doing, why we do it, and why it's part of my strategy. It's too many times people believe this is philanthropy. It's not philanthropy.
No.
Yeah.
It's part of my
core
overall
business.
strategy
Good
to
business.
succeed as a company.
Sustainable
And
business.
I think
And
the
that's why
reporting will
I
help.
need to bring it up.
Yeah.
And
Very good.
I worked with European investors, now a little bit more American, and they're a little bit different as well. So you need to work with it.
I love the energy
We
with
do
this. Yeah.
need to shift investors. I mean, we have
Yeah.
$37 trillion of workers' capital invested
Great
in the global
point.
economy. It's
Yes.
our pensions.
Yes.
And we are, frankly, sick of it being passively invested. You give it to the list. It's actually not doing good for workers because a lot of companies we invest in simply don't pay living wages, they don't respect rights, they don't bargain collectively. But equally important, it's not doing the job for the climate either. And so one of our latest initiatives, because we're so passionate about getting the trust from Just Transition, we actually partnered with the PRI and with the London School of Economics and Harvard, and we've put out an investor brief on Just Transition. And I'm actually kind of surprised but delighted that I don't know exactly the latest figure, but it's almost up to 10 billions already been, 10 trillions already been actually signed on to actually look through the lens of saying, is it about just transition and are we doing good for the planet and for workers? So, you know, we have to shift the investment. And frankly, if all the CEOs here told Standard & Poor's that they were just going to tear up their ratings if they didn't include a social element.
Action point.
This would be really,
point.
really
CEOs,
good. They're
listen up.
actually a certain
Working on it. They're working on it.
they don't own you. And,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, Paul Polman said, I'm
Yeah,
not doing
yeah.
quarterly reports.
Yeah.
The world hasn't
I
fallen
made a
apart.
proposal. Why don't we use the World Economic Forum to accelerate that? Because we all agree,
Yeah.
if you don't measure environment and social, we will not make progress. But as you said, there are plenty of standards, there are plenty of measurement, but not a big one that is a reference.
Yeah.
And at the same time, even if it's increasing, very few investors take it at the same level, seriously, I would say seriously. So how we cannot have a workshop to say, well, we need to progress on that because we'll all say now the number of CEOs and even investors they say it's important. Let's also call to action because if we don't, if we are not consistent from an investment standpoint and from a measurement standpoint, we will have the same discussion in 3 years.
I love this. Okay, another action point. We're being filmed. Klaus, I hope you're listening. Let's get a group of CEOs, labor leaders, government officials to sign on to new metrics at the WEF next year. That's one challenge for us.
Very good.
I'm going to, before
We're there.
Okay, all right. Oh my God, I love this.
Productive. Are we done now or not?
No, you know, you got 15 more minutes. Okay, one more question before I open it up to the audience. I want to bring it back to the individuals and to education because this is a big debate globally. You know, what is the path? How should education be reformed in order to train the new workforce? I mean, one thing I actually feel optimistic about, there's a lot of kind of negativity around the skills gap in education. I actually feel optimistic because in the US anyway, I see, even though the system is very flawed in many ways, I see a lot of paths opening up. So I see a number of businesses, for example, working to create programs where kids will come out of high school with a 2-year college degree, as well as in a state system where then that cuts the educational costs later on. I see community colleges and vocational programs, the kind of Germanic model becoming more important. I see talk about making education cheaper. I see questions about whether a 4-year degree is for everyone. So I'm curious if you all want to jump in on that and say what you think needs to happen in the educational system. Perhaps, Minister, you want to start to ensure good jobs and a good labor force.
First, it's a basic remark, but it's still still very important to say it. We need to invest massively to the primary education. I mean, daycare.
That's interesting.
Primary education. We have measured in France that, in fact, children were very poor. When they enter the school, the primary school, they have 10 times less words to dispose.
Wow.
how they can succeed. So what we are doing now in France, we're investing massively on the first. We are going to do the early education 3 to 6 compulsory, mandatory for everyone, because we have 90% that go, and it's free. But the 10% that don't go, most of them are from poor family. So first we want to have all the kids to have the same opportunity, and then at the level of 6. At the age, of 6, where really they learned to read and write, which is critical. We are doing a massive investment to have much more teacher, much more a different approach, for sure that all kids really master reading, writing, technology, math, and respect, and social respect. It's
Social respect, I love that that's in there with STEM.
And it seems the soft skills to live together.
Yeah.
And it seems trivial. But even in a developed country, we're not there for 100% of the population. We need 100% of our kids to be sure they have the tools to
so
grow.
interesting that you
And
have to start-
after we do massive things after 16 years, and that's more my part with my colleague of education before.
Yeah.
But it's a joint effort because we need to invest on young kids, especially, for instance, for the reading. The kids who don't have book at school, book at home, or nobody reads, sorry, they don't progress the same. So we have to compensate that. It will make them more involved in a cultural environment.
Yeah.
And I think it's this early investment, based on the fact that after 16 we will have a massive investment to retrain all the time. I think it's a key. It's very simple, but to do it massively, it's a challenge. But I think
It's
we'll
so
be
interesting you have to start so early too.
I can say I use the same model for everything I try to do. So first of all, you do with your own staff. You try to give them all the potential to reskill and train and so. Then of course, as we're a technology company, we also understand that we are doing massive connectivity around the country in the US especially. So and then of course we're very interested to get STEM out in the schools. So we have actually decided that we are doing $400 million investment in 350 schools that doesn't have connectivity, don't have the pads, and nor having a STEM program. There you need an even better collaboration within public and private, because then you get either can a private company come in to do it. But I see it, if I do it internally, and then I can go out and say that I can do it externally, it's actually working. So we are in the middle of deployment to deploy $400 million in 350 schools in the US that doesn't have connectivity, even though they can be very close where it's very great areas, they don't have it. And so I think it has to be a partnership. I of course need agility in the education system, much quicker learning process, etc. But it's also responsibility for public companies, part of their strategy. And again, it's part of our strategy is to do technology, is to learn people that technology, and of course, then we can bring it to them.
Okay, do you want to make a final point before?
No, I would like to bring another perspective.
Sure.
Because you have said it, we don't know what the jobs will be in 5 to 10 years from now. But what we know, it is very important to learn soft skills, new soft skills.
Yes.
So teamwork, creativity,
Yes.
empathy. And I think it is important from the basic education to learn these new capacities, this curiosity, also how to learn. Because this will be probably the best skills you can bring with you towards the future.
This is a really profound point, actually, because there is a lot of research to show that teams create more productive, more profitable companies. But frankly, incentive-wise, sometimes you have a superstar economy. That's another issue. We could have another panel on incentives. But Saadia, I'm looking at you. Maybe next year. We've got a couple questions coming through here on the iPad. So let me ask these to the group. First, from Johanna Bryson, it seems to me that the issue is not jobs, but wages and inequality. Does AI make people more substitutable, reducing wage differentiation and the collective power of labor? So maybe Sharan, others want to...
Well, that's true. There's no doubt that if we don't, inequality has been seen as a global risk, and, you'll hear people say it's not globalisation. We are all committed to a global trade environment, but not on the current rules, because the current model of supply chains are exploitative, they're dehumanising, and frankly, good CEOs who work in their normal direct employment relationships in probably a very positive way, have no idea what's going on in their supply chains. They choose often not to have any
we
idea.
should.
It's true.
Because that's the obscurity.
Yeah.
Now,
That's how it
due diligence is mandated. It's the UN Business and Human Rights Principles. It's voluntary in there, but it's mandated in France. We want due diligence mandated everywhere. It is about responsibility.
And that's something technology can actually help with. I mean, I'm
Yes.
hearing a lot of interest from supply chain folks.
No, you're right. I mean, even though you have 150,000 employees, when I start looking into how many are impacting every day and part of my supply chain, they need to live up to the same standard. I mean, ultimately, it's our responsibility and our brand that is involved if I have a partner that is not living up to the standard that we have. And we have cases like that.
Well,
it happens. But you need to audit that. You need to put it into the contracts with the supplier and saying that this is how we behave, this is our rules,
Exactly.
etc. And if you don't do it, I can tell you it will not work, especially if you're going to get to an environment where you're a small company and you use partners who are delivering everything. You need a very transparent supply chain in order to do that.
But you know, the AI question, technology unchecked is actually fueling monopolies.
Yes,
And
yes.
you know more about this, Rana, than anybody. I'm your biggest
This has been my hobby
fan.
horse.
But indeed, if you take a company like Amazon, we gave up on competition policy, for example. There are others. And yet Amazon's direct employees in the US are paid, you know, richest man in the world. Company now is expanding in every sector, and it will within 4 or 5 years be the dominant global retailer, buying up all sorts of companies that are risking development in other environments. But a third of the workforce in the US is eligible for food stamps. So imagine what the exploitation's like through the supply chain. That's got to end. That is about the rule of law, a new social contract, a labour guarantee as a floor, and due diligence. It's a package that can work.
Yeah, jump in, Alain.
I think coming back to the statements, I think we should not blame AI technology for the wage issue and so on. I think there are two separate topics. Thanks to technology, we can amplify the human resources, the work of the human resources. We can concentrate the human resources on what they really like to do. So we should look at the opportunities of the technology. The other topics regarding wages and so on should be treated, I think, differently without the point of the technology. It's all about this new reinvigorated social contract, about the wealth distribution and who is getting what for what. But for me, this has nothing to do with technology.
Okay. Let me put up one more question here, and then maybe we'll open it up to folks in the audience as well. And actually, I'm going to put two questions that are sort of related, one that's popped up as well. From an anonymous questioner, as investors in a low-interest environment, I am not sure we are ready to allow less profitable companies. What do you think? That's interesting because that question is essentially saying, look, we're at a market turning point here. We may be at the end of a credit cycle. I mean, if you think about recessions typically happen every 8 to 11 years. We're 10 years into a global recovery cycle. Is this a moment in which we're going to be able to make the kinds of changes that we're talking about here?
I think the assumption is wrong.
Okay.
Sustainable companies are more profitable.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you don't
Exactly.
believe in that,
Long term.
I mean, I think we need to have that mindset, and that we have proven. I think so. I think the statement is wrong. I mean, you should, if you lead the company, you should believe if you do sustainability and doing the right thing for the society, that's going to bring you a better strategy. Better customers going to like you better, and you can have better products. I mean, if you don't believe that, I mean, wow.
The question
He's
is whether or not.
right. But why have we got low or stagnant growth?
Yeah.
Comes back to Henry Ford got this right
Yeah,
a long time ago.
Demand.
If you want people to buy your products, you have to have a living wage.
Yeah.
And consequently, without that, the cycle of economic growth, when all the wealth's concentrated in 1%, the economics are simple.
I'm always fascinated by Henry Ford, the fact that he was pro-demand but anti-union.
Yeah,
That's
he
like, you know, we could do a whole nother session on him,
Another
him
world.
sometime.
Another time.
We'll forgive him that because he's dead, but...
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I'm not going into that conversation.
No, neither.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Are we going to take questions? Are there mics? Should we
There's
take
question
questions?
there.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go back here, and then I'll do one more.
Thank you very much. My name is Hao Bin from the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security, China. And we are a ministry responsible for promoting employment, developing skill, and extending our social insurance programs and promoting harmonious labor relation. So the topic today in this room is very relevant. So in fact, we have a vice minister here attending this conference.
Excellent.
Yes, listening very attentively. So the discussion and insight is really relevant to us. The question I would like to ask, perhaps all of you, is that our topic is about a strategy, job creation strategy for Industry 4. In this job, in this strategy, there is a very important group, that is the people who live in poverty. So how, in developing our strategies, that we can help those people, that they can
That are most
adapt,
vulnerable.
yes,
Yeah.
to the fourth industrial, and really even thrive. So
That's a
thank
great
you very
question,
much.
and I would add to that something from the pad here. How do you create growth in cities that are not international hubs? You know, in the rural areas, in second or third tier cities. So who wants to speak to that?
Maybe.
I can start if you. I can kick off. We know each other very well, so thank you for your presence and thank you also for your questions. Now, when we looked at the data, and there has been statistics from the OECD about the development of the unemployment during the last 10 years. And it's very interesting. You see that, in fact, the impact of the future of work, of the Industry 4.0, is mainly on the medium-skilled people. But people with rather limited skills, but perhaps a lot of soft skills, empathy, customer service, and so on, has not been impacted by this technology inroad. Also, the highly skilled people have not been really impacted. On the contrary, you see the employment growing. The big impact is on the medium skilled, and that's where we need to reskill these people or to upskill them to really bring them in the competencies and the skills new technology is requested to function.
Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe the French experience on that. First, in our big skills investment plan, we target mainly, of course, young people and unemployed people. So low skills. The level of unemployment, it's 3% for managers. So there's no more unemployment for managers. 6% for qualified people. 18% for unqualified people. So the first differentiation is skills. The second thing is where you live.
Yeah.
And we have specific program, because when you live in a suburb areas or rural area, we can measure that you have, with the same qualification, half the chance to get a job if you have not the right address or you don't have a way to go there. So it's part of our plan.
And we can see it in our politics.
Third, it's about women. And that's a question of wages, economic performance, and social equity.
And the care economy. So people
Exactly.
Yeah.
So half the family in France are single mothers. How do they get a job? How they can be skilled? How they been trained? So how we fill the gender gap. It's why we passed a bill also on gender equality. And since 1st of January, now there is an obligation of results that we have built with social partners for all companies in France. And we are very confident because we have created an index to measure, to make progress, but we have built it together. And for the first time on this topic, we have full support of unions and employers. But today we have 9% of difference of wages for the same jobs, still 46 years after the law, the previous law, and 25% if you compare careers. That's in all countries. So that's part of the question of wages and skills. And we have also created rights, supplementary rights for people working part-time, because 80% are women. So you cannot what I mean is you cannot separate your policy in
it's gotta be
silos.
holistic.
One is women,
Yeah,
one is
yeah.
education, one is environment, one is a middle-size or suburbs area.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you have to combine them, and then you can innovate.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. We have one very eager questioner back here. Make it a quick one.
Yes, I think that we should use the fourth industrial revolution and to solve this problem and not
Yes.
create
Yes.
indexes between companies
Ah.
and governments. Ask the people, ask the workers,
Hear, hear.
and have
Okay.
them develop their own dashboard about their
They
customized
build it.
personal needs for training and overcoming poverty. Let's not repeat the big thing. Now we can reach every
Interesting.
worker
Okay, ground
has
up.
a Facebook page, WhatsApp. We can now customize the training needs for every family in the world easily, if we allow them to measure their own strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, that is, oh wait, do we have, oh Saadia, are you going to have a couple of words here at the end? What are we?
I can.
Yeah, please. Okay. Saadia, you're on. This is your show, actually. This is the woman behind a lot of the stats you've been hearing about, so.
Okay, well, thank
ahead.
you very much, Rana, and thank you to the panel. Fascinating conversation, and I think much more solutions-oriented than in the past year. I think we went beyond the context, beyond discussing how there might be disruptions to jobs and really starting to talk about what are some of the solutions around jobs, education, and skills. What was also interesting is all of the broader factors that came into play, the topic around market concentration, the topic around the need for better social safety nets. All of this is being taken forward in the forum's new Center for the New Economy and Society, which we've just created a few months ago, and it's meant to be a response. It's to go to Alain's point. Let's not worry about technology as the problem. Let's think about what the opportunity space is, and let's try to identify how we deal with the implications for our economic policies and for our societies. So for those of you who would be interested in continuing the conversation, please do talk to me or any of my team members, and we'd be happy to connect with you. Thanks, Rana.
Thank you for that. Thank you to the panelists for a really engaging and action-oriented conversation. You guys rock. Okay, thanks to the
Good
audience.
leadership.
And a very good leadership.